Hi, today I'm gonna talk about what is life, its basic components and characteristics. Well, living things can be classified in two types, as unicellular or multicellular. We consider a living thing an organism that performs the three vital functions, which are interaction, that is the reaction to stimuli from environment, nutrition, that is the obtention of matter and energy through chemical reactions, and reproduction, that is the production of new organisms of the same species. A very common question is how life is generated. In ancient times, there were lots of hypotheses, and one that was famous was the spontaneous hypothesis, that argues that living things came from the association of non-living matter and special energy called vital force. An example of this theory would be to believe that flies came from decomposing food. In the 17th century, people began to question the idea of spontaneous generation, and scientists began to carry out controlled experiments. Two of the most important ones were developed by Reddy and Pasteur. And now I'm gonna talk about the Reddy experiment. Some biologists started to make some new experiments, and one of those was the red experiment. The red experiment was a really easy experiment that talks about three containers. In the first container, there was fresh meat, but the container was open. The meat attracted the flies, and this meat produced some worms that then transformed into flies. In the second container, the jars were tightly covered. Meat was inside, and flies couldn't enter. So this couldn't produce maggots or worms. So this shows us that oxygen and air is needed to produce life. And also shows that flies are necessary to produce flies. In the third container, Reddy demonstrated the dead maggots or flies would not generate new flies when placed on rotting meat in a covered jar, whereas live maggots or flies would. This disproved both the existence of some essential components in one's living organisms and the necessity of fresh air to generate life. Well, nowadays we have some different hypotheses. The one that is very common and famous is the panspermia hypothesis. This theory talks about that the first living things that appeared on Earth were microorganisms carried by outer space material such as asteroids, comets, meteorites, etc. However, microorganisms that we know haven't survived the space trip due to the pressure, the cold, and a lot of things more. And the shock, yes, and all temperatures and that. Well, now I'm gonna talk about molecular panspermia hypothesis. This theory sustains that what came from outer spaces were organic biomolecules, and that the origin of living things from those biomolecules took place in the Earth, promoted by the chemical and energetic conditions of our planet at that time. Actually, sugars and amino acids have been found in some meteorites. At the beginning, and now I'm gonna talk about the Oparin and Halden's hypothesis. At the beginning of the 20th century, Oparin and Haldan developed a hypothesis according to which the first living things would have emerged from inorganic matter through several psychochemical processes promoted by conditions in primitive Earth. 3,800 million years ago. Metabolism first. This was an experiment that they made to prove this hypothesis. This hypothesis explains that formation of protocells in which chemical reactions used for obtaining energy and molecules for building new structures were the first one to be organized in a coordinated way. Now to prove that the Oparin-Halden hypothesis was true, Miller and Urey made an experiment. They simulated conditions on the early Earth to investigate how the basic building blocks of life, such as amino acids, could have formed from inorganic compounds. In the experiment, gases such as methane, ammonia, hydrogen were used, and electrical discharges were applied to them to simulate lighting. After a week, several organic compounds, including amino acids, were detected. They couldn't form cells. Now I'm gonna talk about the hydrothermal vents and the origin of life. The hydrothermal vents are underwater openings that release hot, mineral-rich water found along ocean ridges where tectonic plates met. These extreme environments may have played a key role in the origin of life, as the heat and chemical reactions could have developed from complex organic molecules. The presence of extremophiles suggests life could have originated in similar conditions, using energy sources like hydrogen and methane. In short, hydrothermal vents are considered a plausible site for the origin of life. Now I'm gonna talk about the metabolism sphere hypothesis. It starts with the idea that spontaneous chemical reactions could occur on the early Earth. Chemicals participating in these reactions would initially be small, simple molecules. As this reaction occurs, the production of free energy, which can go to powering other non-spontaneous and chemical reactions. Eventually, the energy production and energy use in reactions from a closed cycle, where chemical cycles are on in a process that provide energy and a suite of molecules that could be useful for life. These simple molecules led to more complex molecules that could be used in life. Under this theory, genetic material evolved later after metabolic processes had developed. Now I'm gonna talk about another hypothesis that is called the RNA world hypothesis. The RNA world hypothesis suggests that life on Earth began with a simple RNA molecule that could copy itself without help from other molecules. Now I'm gonna talk about LUCA. Around 4 billion years ago existed an unicellular organism that we assume all living things descend from that was called LUCA. That is basically last universal common ancestor. It didn't need oxygen and made food from hydrogen, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen. LUCA is the ancestor of all life on Earth. Phylogenetics, the study of genetic relationship, helped trace life origins. Scientists once believed life had three main branches: eukarya, bacteria, and archaea, with eukarya being the most complex, with a nucleus and organelles with mitochondria. Now I'm gonna talk about the transformation from anaerobic to aerobic. Living organisms transitioned from anaerobic without oxygen to aerobic with oxygen. Over billions of years, early life, like LUCA, thrived in environments without oxygen, using substances like hydrogen and carbon dioxide for energy. As photosynthesis, organisms evolved. They started producing oxygen as a bioproduct, leading to the Great Oxygenated Event around 2.4 billion years ago. This increased oxygen and the atmosphere, allowing the evolution of aerobic organisms that rely on oxygen for energy production. Aerobic metabolism is much more efficient, enabling the development of more complex life forms. Now I'm gonna talk from prokaryotes to eukaryotes. The evolution from prokaryotes to eukaryotes began with LUCA around 3,800 million years ago. Cyanobacteria formed stromatolites 3,500 million years ago. Through endosymbiosis, prokaryotes gave rise to mitochondria and chloroplast, the nucleus, cytoskeleton and internal membranes emerge, enabling compartmentation, complex processes like mitosis, and the diversification and multicellularity of eukaryotes. Well, now I'm gonna talk about biomarkers and extremophiles. Astrobiology and studies of life, origin, and Earth are closely connected. Biomarkers, life like cells and organic molecules, are evidence of life and guide to search for it on other planets. Scientists use spectroscopy to detect these markers by analyzing planetary light. Well, then, extremophiles, which live in extreme Earth environment, show how life might survive on harsh planets. These studies help us to understand where and how life might exist in the universe. Tools like telescopes, rovers, and space probes make this exploration possible. Together, they combine knowledge of Earth's life with the search for life beyond our planet.